The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André and I'm your host. Big thanks to Ukla the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another fun-filled, action-packed edition of the show. As we near a year and a half since I began this little journey, I actually believe it's a little longer than that. I didn't know what this would be when I started. It was kind of a COVID project, something I've always wanted to do, and thought, hey, let's do it and see what happens. I didn't know how it would shift or how it would change. And yeah, and over time it's become strictly an interview show. It's become bi-weekly instead of weekly, and it's been great. You know, I hope to maybe make it weekly. We'll see as the guests roll in. That may be possible. This week's guest, of course, is Jack Briglio, who works with Chapter House, has done a lot of cool projects, worked for Legion of Superheroes for DC Comics. He's worked on Scooby-Doo. He's worked on some other really interesting projects and kid-friendly books, and a super fun interview. And I can't thank him enough for being on the show, or for Tony White, former guest and editor for Chapter House, for making the introduction. Tony's been a great resource as of late, pointing people towards our show and helping make introductions to make these interviews possible. And I can't thank him enough for doing that, because it's really up to the caliber of guests we have on the show and made for some really interesting conversations. And I can't thank him enough for that. Yeah, thanks, Tony. I know you're a listener, so thank you, sir. And I look forward to seeing you again soon in the future. I also look forward to hopefully the opening of conventions. There's been some invitations, some of the local conventions, advertising for next season. And I hope those all go through and that things pick up where they were not left off, because I do miss doing the convention circuit. I do miss selling art at those things. And hopefully now that I do this, it's something that I can contribute to convention as well. Perhaps host some panels, maybe do this live, which would be a lot of fun. And I would really, really enjoy. So I would very much hope that is something that we can do in the future. So I think I'm going to go straight into the episode, because it has been a long day. And I don't feel like giving a lot of commentary on things. I had seen the Eternals film, which is sort of new, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was very epic in scope, and I feel as though the director, Chloe, I'm blanking on her last name, starts with a Z. Her work on it was amazing. She's a very talented filmmaker. I love Nomadland. I thought that was a fantastic film, and you could kind of tell it was by the same director, just in the way it was framed, the way it was filmed, and an odd beauty to the cinematography that I really enjoyed. So, yeah, check it out. And not to give any spoilers, as it's still a fairly new thing, but the stinger sequence at the end of the film was very cool and introduced some characters from the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe that I was very excited to see being featured in a live-action film. And I'm very pumped to see what they're going to do with them, because those two are personal favorites of mine, and I am quite jazzed to see what they're going to do. Super cool. Very happy with that. But without any further ado, let's just say I'm getting excited for Spider-Man. It's going to be good. I'm super pumped for that, and we'll discuss that after I see it. The new Hawkeye series comes out this weekend, which I'm also very excited for, and I'll be watching that as well once it drops. But without any of that stuff, let's get into the episode. So today I talk with Jack Briglio.
Good. How are you?
I am well.
Let me try it as... There we go. I'm on screen there.
Oh, excellent. All good.
Yeah.
How's your day going?
Pretty good. Pretty
Yeah?
good. Yeah.
How's the weather up in... where are you at? In Ottawa?
Ottawa.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, weird day, because it was cold. It was like -2 yesterday. There's risk of freezing rain, but we didn't get any. Just got rain, and the temperature went up. And today, like this morning, it was like already 9 degrees. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's crawling up here
There.
too. It's going up to like 12 today or something. So it's
Yeah.
weird because it's raining, but yeah, it's just the East Coast, I guess.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me, Jack. It's great to have you on.
Great. Where are you? You're in
Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia. Okay.
Yeah. Do you know where Truro is?
Truro. I've heard of Truro.
About an hour from Halifax.
Okay, cool.
So if you're coming through from Moncton, they call it the hub of Nova Scotia because it's kind of in the center. So if you're coming from Moncton, like into Halifax or Nova Scotia in general, you usually have to pass through it. So
nice. Visited Halifax for the first time a few years ago and loved it. So.
Oh, really? Excellent. Were you down for a convention or something, or just visiting?
Yeah, I was down for one of the Geekwinox. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh crap, we might have rubbed elbows then because I've been to all those. So.
Yeah.
I may have seen you there at some point. Are you there with Tony?
Yeah, Tony, actually, yeah. Tony,
yeah. Tony's a friend and facilitated this, so I can't thank him enough for that as well.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up? Where did you start at?
Ottawa, actually, born and bred, still here in Ottawa. Family is Italian background, so my parents came from Italy.
Both Italian immigrants?
Yep, both.
Wow.
Both sides. Yeah.
When did they come here?
My dad in 1953, and then my mom in 1959. That's when they got married. So, and then
did they meet here, or they know each other in Italy?
They knew each other in Italy.
Okay.
And then they moved. Their first place was in Ottawa. They came to the Sault Ste. Marie. And Dad worked there for a bit until about like 10 years later they moved to Ottawa. But yeah.
Oh, what do they do?
My dad, well, at the Sault, he worked. He worked, I think, the railways. But
Mm-hmm.
when he moved to Ottawa, he worked for the region. He passed away a couple of years back, but he worked for the region and retired. Had a good career there. And my mom's a retired seamstress now.
Oh wow! It seems like the seminal immigrant stories. You come to North America and you work on the rails.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I remember him telling me stories about that, and I thought that was so interesting because, well, Sault Ste. Marie, a lot of the times people go there. The reason why so many people went to the Sault was because Algoma Steel was a huge company back then and hiring tons of people. So a lot of the Sault, the workers there, they all worked at Algoma Steel. And I don't think my dad ever did. He did other stuff. And,
oh, interesting.
Eventually,
So, are you brothers, sisters?
One sister, older sister.
Excellent.
Also here in Ottawa. And,
oh, excellent. Seems like you guys all kind of kept together, which is nice.
Yeah. No, Christmas time isn't no huge treks or anything across country or across North America or whatever.
That makes it easy. I feel like that's an East Coast thing too. It's like a lot of my cousins and relatives. Very few of them have really scattered across the country. There's only like a handful that have kind of gone on to go way far away. And most of them are generally in Nova Scotia still somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, for us, it was like going. For us, as when I was a kid, it was like going to the Sault to visit there, right? Going there mainly. Didn't do a lot of visits back to Italy, but obviously had family back there, and some cousins and stuff in various parts of North America. We had cousins all the way in Texas and in New York as well. So, but yeah.
The Italians are generally kind of a big family, not to be overly stereotypical, but aren't they?
Oh
yeah, pretty
totally.
big.
On my dad's side, there was tons of like 8 brothers and sisters. So yeah, lots awesome. Lots of Briglios across the
spreading across North America.
Exactly.
Very nice. Was comics always something you're into as a kid?
Absolutely, yeah. From a young age, I think I remember like 5, 6 years old. I think my sister would bring me to the local convenience store. And they grabbed me early. Grabbed me early right then and there until I eventually found comic stores, and I was like, oh wow, a mecca of comics. This is, and never gave up on that. So yeah, no, from an early age, definitely, it was my primary source of reading. Really, never really got into heavily, I guess. I never really heavily got into reading novels and other things. It was always comics for me.
Oh, interesting. We had a
Yeah.
discussion with he's a rapper from Halifax, Sean Jordan. He's known as Word Burglar, about that. How it's like a generational thing. Like I was just on the cusp of that, where the supermarket still had comic books. Like you go to a Needs and grab comics, and how that's like it's not really a thing anymore. But back when I was younger, that was sort of your introduction into it. You know, you'd see a
Totally.
Spider-Man comic or something bright and colorful, and you'd be all over that and grab onto it. And then when you finally walk into a real comic store, it's like overload of the senses. Like you just like I remember
Totally.
Strange Adventures was probably the first main one I walked into in Halifax when I was a kid, and I remember I was like blown away that like there's a whole store just for comic books.
Yeah, we for me totally same thing, right? I mean I found the Archies and the Richie Riches, especially digests at grocery stores, convenience stores, those kind of things, and then but I would see at convenience stores that there were comics, the floppies, right? And it was like. And then I discovered a couple of stores. One was one was an actual comic store called Arthur's that brought in new comics. And when I found that, I was like, oh, it was like world changing for me. I have to go there every week now. And I would get my dad to drive me to that every week. But before then, there was also a place nearby that wasn't really didn't have new books, but it was called Stephanie's, and there was this older guy that brought in, it looked like it was older, they weren't recent, but they were comics of like DC and Marvel stuff from recent years for and he would be selling them for like 35 cents, 50 cents, 75 cents, a buck. I mean, these were pretty significant amounts then compared to now, because of what the prices of them were. But yeah, so I remember picking up books there too. It was kind of like my back issue store for a little while, anyways, until Arthur's and more comic stores started proliferating in Ottawa. So.
Do you remember what the first books were, like your first comics that you read when you were that young?
Like in superheroes, because
or whatever. I mean,
yeah, like for sure. I think the first ones for me were like before discovering superhero books. The Archies and the Richie Riches, especially Archies. I bought a lot of Archie digests, so definitely started up on Archies. And I liked Richie Rich too, because Richie Rich was had a whole variety of things, including fantasy superhero-y type adventures too. So. I jumped back and forth between both of those, and then and I occasionally find superhero digests of like the old '60s Marvel books and those kind of things. But when I first got into superhero comics, I think the first ones I remember are some DC ones, and I mean, and to this day they're still my main characters that I follow in DC. It was like I remember Flash Comics. I remember the Legion of Superheroes, and oddly enough I remember the JSA, because the only series that was around then was like a really short run of All-Star Comics. But because the Justice League kept on yearly having those JLA JSA team ups, I loved those as a kid. Like every year I couldn't wait for the next crossover, because back then there weren't crisis events like there are today.
Every other year.
Every 3 months, every 6 months now. It's not even yearly. It's really what's the
so
event. So those were the big events for me, and I love the JSA.
So as a reader, how did you feel when they finally got to the Crisis on Infinite Earth? Were you following it when that happened? Did that the end of an era for you? Because they kind of, wiped. I mean, JSA did come back, but
they wiped everything. So it was changing from. I mean, I love Crisis. I mean, because it had also my favorite creators at the time, like Wolfman, Perez, Ordway, and Ordway inking. I love Jerry Ordway as a penciler alone, and then having him ink Perez, it was just beautiful, and it was a great story. The limitations of it, I didn't like how I understood where they were going with it, and they told a lot of good stories, but everything's cyclical in those worlds. So everything eventually came back in some form or other. But
it's kind of interesting.
No, I enjoyed it.
As a writer, you must find that interesting too, that like, you know, there's a weird marriage. I mean, I've often talked about the marriage between comics as an art and comics as a business, and how, you know, when there's corporate interests at work, when they're like, we need to simplify this and make it more accessible, there can't be multiple universes, and like how working with artists and creators to like figure out a way to do that and be like, well, let's do this big event. Like, it must have been quite an interesting conversation to sit in a room when that first came up, and they're like, well, let's collapse them all into one universe and rewrite continuity and you know, start over again with everybody, basically, because now like you say, it's done every 3 or 4 months. Exactly. Like, to try to explain I've talked about this a lot too, is like to try to explain to somebody what's going on with Superman right now. They're like, why Superman's son Superman? It's like, well, there's a Superman from a different universe that's in this universe, and this universe Superman died, and that universe Superman took over, you know, but that universe of Superman was a compilation of a bunch of other universal Supermen, and it's like, it's tough to lunch.
Yeah, I don't know how a reader follows continuity today. It was totally understandable to be back in the 80s, but like 30 years later, everything, you know, everybody complained about some of the same characters they go over and over again. Oh, how they screwed Hawkman and how they screwed, you know, the Legion because of all the continuity changes.
Oh God, I can't keep track of them at all. It just seems like every few years they put out a new series, and this is the new start over.
And it's like today, I go, I hope readers don't get too you know, worked up over that, and just try to enjoy the stories, because you know, obviously, you know, it's nice trying to weave it and all, have it all make sense. But
I kind of feel though, as a reader, it like, I don't think the industry suffered because of it. I think it just shifted in that, like, if you want to follow the Legion of Superheroes, you just pick an era and then buy the graphic novels. Like, I feel like it just sort of made the floppies almost redundant, because then you just can go read the full collection and get that full story and not have to like pick something up in the middle of something else and not understand it. So at least this way you get like a bookended story that you can read through and not have to deal with all the, you know, the mixed match continuity.
Exactly. And yeah, and then you have your fans that are set on certain eras. Well, this was the, you know, for Legion, this is Legion for me. And and for me, it's like, I like all the versions. I mean, they all work in different ways, and that's what you're going to get when you've got 50, 60, 70 years worth of storytelling. Like, I mean, every editor, every writer that comes in is trying to do something different. Sure, they try to, you know, they base it off stuff they liked, and obviously those kind of things have a basis. But you know, they're always trying to do something new, so that they're not revisiting, you know, familiar ground too badly, right? Because you don't want to see the same stories over and over again either.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because you can really tell the writers that have a real reverence for those sort of books, because they usually start reinventing or bringing back all these characters that you haven't seen in 40 years, you know, or even 30 years. It's like, you know, Matter Eater Lad or someone that pops up and you're like, wow, this guy's story, you know, usually he always comes in somehow, but some of those old ones too, you're just like, that you never really saw, or had like these really weird powers, or like leftovers from like the zany days where Superboy was juggling planets with them and doing all that sort of stuff. But I love Matter Eater Lad. I wanted to know more about him when I first started reading the Legion, and they never really used him a lot. So, you know, it wasn't until later that he was used more and more. And then when, you know, the beer bombs and the Moy run, when they did that run, it was or after that run, I should say, when when they restarted after Zero Hour, that stuff was like, okay, now all the characters are again get new shelf life. It was always nice. Yeah. I know the stories, the Legion stories. I ended up writing that. You know, I did have a Matter Eater Lad moment, so I was glad I was able to use the character in the Legion stories I wrote. But it's funny, like as fandom too, and the Legion of Superheroes is kind of a good representative of this, because there's so many people in it and that come and go over the years. But like, you know, the initial writer of it, or the initial whoever had written that first maybe Matter Eater Lad comic, who would have been like, let's just throw this character in. It's kind of funny, like he eats matter. Let's just go with that. And then as the years go on, it's like watching Star Wars and there's like an alien in the background. And you're like, oh, that guy looks cool. And then like later on, he becomes some super important thing, or he gets his own comics or his own book. Like it's just this throwaway thing that someone tosses in for fun. And as the years pile on and fandom grows, they're just interested in every aspect of it. So everybody needs some big story and becomes some big character.
Totally. Like they try to do a lot of different things with him to make him interesting. And yeah, totally. I mean, that's what it is. And I guess that's what reboots give people the opportunity to, like, you look at the characters again and say, okay, look at it with a different angle, or, or completely start from anew if there are some characters that are just no longer fit as characters anymore, right?
I always find this need to make everything relevant interesting. Like everybody, like every old comic character doesn't need to have a gritty, new, relevant backstory. Like I remember when Warren Ellis turned Speedball Independence, like back when Marvel did that, and they made him like this pain obsessed, like super emo, like hurting himself to use his powers kind of character. I'm like, wow, like there's almost like one of the farthest reaches of how two characters can go. It's like turning Batman into like a happy-go-lucky, like, I mean, he used to be back in the day, I suppose. So it's not the best example.
Wasn't it Ditko? Was it Ditko that worked on the first Speedballs? I'd love to.
Yes, he did. Yeah,
I'd love to get his impressions on where that went. I'm sure.
I mean, he's gone back to it now, but and Ditko is like notorious for being, kind of curmudgeonly and not liking anything really at all anymore.
Totally.
Up until his death. I read the Stan Lee biography, that True Believer one that came out like a year ago, and I remember like reading a bit about Ditko and sort of the relationship those two had. He's so private. There's not a lot of information about him.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Not only are there interesting characters in comics, but interesting creators in comics as well.
Yeah, often they say truth is stranger than fiction in the comic world, especially reading Stan Lee's biography. It's pretty accurate. There's some pretty weird and interesting stuff in that book, but it was an interesting read for sure. Cool. So was writing always something you're interested in, or is it something that came later? Like when you were reading the comics growing up, is this something you thought I want to create someday?
I think I always wanted to create. I remember some of my earliest memories of trying to create comics myself. There weren't any comic creating kits back in the day, so I'd staple together a bunch of pieces of paper and foolscap pieces of paper and try to draw. I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a stick man kind of artiste. So, but. I remember doing a bunch of stories that way to kind of that was my kind of first foray into trying comics. But yeah, writing it was something I always wanted to do. I loved comics so much. I knew I couldn't draw, and but I was creative and I wanted to write stories. So I kept working on that. So now. High school, obviously there's some writing classes and stuff, but it wasn't until, I guess, university, and actually even after university, where I took a script writing course where I got a little more, structure, I guess, behind,
like for film script writing?
Film script writing, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I took a 4-month postgraduate certificate degree at the college here after university, because just to kind of get myself into learning proper structure, and also on the film side, it was like, okay, well, maybe we'll see where that goes to. And I did try to do a little bit of writing on that side, but never really went too far into the film side of things, although I did write a few screenplays that never went anywhere, but a
lot don't.
yeah.
It's interesting if people that aren't familiar, if you look at script writing for comics, people have their own sort of style, but script writing for screen, if you read a film script and you read a comic script, they're generally very similar in structure.
Yeah. Totally. So, yeah. Very, very, very similar. I mean, I think on the film side, it's a little more rigid. In terms of having to follow format and stuff. Yeah. I've seen format for comics very flexible. A lot of people use the screenwriting side, format. But it's not as rigid. And there are things that you're writing that script, you're writing for the artist, right? And you're writing for the letterer, or actually a lot of times for a letterer, you usually do a lettering script afterwards anyways to help out the letterer a little more. So,
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I know I don't do that in all cases, but in some work for hire sides that a lettering script does eventually get done. It just helps the letterer and that sort of thing. And getting that pass after you've seen the art is a kind of an important step in the process. So sometimes that causes obviously after you've seen the art, you get some revisions, some improvements here and there, so that it's the best possible for the letterer, and then hopefully there's less to change.
Yeah.
Not the wholesale revisions or anything like that. But yeah, so I just, after writing was always in my blood, and it was just something that after I got my degree in university, I thought, okay, I'm gonna make it.
What was the university degree?
Bachelor of just a Bachelor of Arts.
Okay.
Yeah, I did English lit, Italian lit actually too. So
wow, cool.
Yeah. So at the University of Ottawa, and I all in the meanwhile kind of trying to come up with story ideas for comics and that sort of thing. So it kind of I spent, I think I spent a lot of my teens and 20s coming up with ideas and trying to break in, getting various things and getting bites here and there, but I eventually took a full-time job, and that kind of helped me, because then I was able to not worry less about making money and focus more on the art side of things, so that I can focus on trying to get to break in and that sort of thing. So,
what was the job?
A job I'm still at, like in 2000, I joined Canada Post. So
right on.
I'm a website manager at Canada Post. I'm I'm a product owner there. So really, yeah, great job, but obviously still it enabled me to actually be able to have the funds, family and all that stuff, to be able to do things like go to conventions and make networking and all the other things that I was able to carve a career, a part-time career, I guess, of doing in writing. So with all the various ups and downs of things getting really busy to lulls where not doing as much. So
yeah. You mentioned family. Were you with someone at this point? Like, did you have when you started?
Yeah, I was married in 97. So, and actually around, it was those first few years where I guess the first things that we started to do. So, like, actually, if I would, let me rewind it.
Sure, yeah.
We want to go right back to the beginning. I guess the first things that. So, like, because we're living in Ottawa, at the time, there was a huge comic company in Ottawa that was all the rage during the black and white era in the mid 80s, and that was Aircell Comics. I don't know if you are familiar with it.
Yeah.
So I had some friends close friend who did some work there, and from there, that's where we kind of, tried to pitch ideas to that company. We actually never ended up doing anything creator-owned for that company, but I did get my first writing credits working for Aircell.
What books were you
on? Dragon Force. So
really?
Yeah, Dragon Force.
I used to love those comics.
Yeah, awesome. The Dale Kewen run.
Yeah.
So Dale Kewen, when he hit it big and moved to Marvel on Hulk, he had to leave Dragon Force, and Alex Sarah and I, we jumped on and finished one issue of his that he had partly gone through. So we had to finish that, and we did one more issue after that. So issues 12 and 13. Not great. Not great.
Hey, you got to start
stuff.
somewhere.
Yeah, but don't search it out. It's no. So it's funny. I look at it and have a good laugh. When I come across it again. But that was so. Actually, I was credited on 12, but 13 was rewritten. We scripted it, Alex and I, and he drew it, all of 13. The script I submitted in and to get lettered and stuff, I ended up being totally rewritten. So I ended up not getting the credit, which actually I was thankful for, because it was that issue. If 12 was not great, this one was even worse. So I always joke around with Alex, because I think Alex ended up getting the credit for it, and I go, yeah, well, there you go, there's your rating.
Your name's on it now. It's your baby.
Look what you're stuck with. But yeah, so that was my first. That was like an 89, I think. So that was just out of, like, what was I, 20 some? I was in university, and that was my big break in comics. Of course, and then there was nothing for another 8 years, when I did a couple of stories for a small press company, Renaissance Press. They had this fantasy anthology book called Mythography, and did a couple of stories there that would eventually be the genesis of Growing Up Enchanted, which we did in 2002, 2003. We self-published. Actually, it was through Too Hip Gotta Go Graphics, Craig Pfeiffer's little company, where he did a book called Wahoo Morris. So so we did Growing Up Enchanted in early 2000s, and that was the biggest break there, because at that time, fantasy adventure, it was an all ages fantasy story. It was good timing, because all ages, I guess, was starting to get a little bit of a resurgence, that we needed more comics for kids, and that sort of talk came into play around that time.
This is 90s, 90s, or no, 80s, sorry?
No, early 2000s. This one.
Oh, early 2000s. Okay, yes.
This is 2002. Right. So, so it was well received. We did 4 issues. It was nominated for an Eisner. So, in 2003. So that was my big break. For both Alex and I, because we got into DC Comics shortly thereafter. So it was
based on that.
Based on that, yeah.
So, like, are you just contacted by them, or is that something you would send to them, or does DC just have an eye out for everything like that's coming around?
For that, I mean, no. So for that, it was networking. I think helped. I mean, I don't think they discovered us alone on the Eisner nom. We started going to a number of conventions in Toronto, and then later New York, like New York Comic Con when that first started. We went the first few years and made contacts that way. In Toronto, I had met one of the DC editors there, Joey Cavalieri, and from that meeting, while he never hired us, it led to other editors hiring us to do some work for their all ages books at the time. So they were doing Teen Titans Go, and Word of the Legion of Superheroes cartoon came out, and I made contacts. I was able to, they were interested in working with me and with.
So did you get to choose that project, or was that something they said, we're working on this, you jumped at it, or do they say, we want to work with you? Is there something you want to work on?
From what this was meeting with the editor and finding out about that there was a new series coming, and I just basically asked, "Are you guys open to pitches for stories?" And they said, "Yeah, definitely. We'd love to." The editor there at the time said she was interested, so to absolutely contact her. This was in New York when we met there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, from there ended up pitching some things, and ended up doing not just Legion, ended up doing Scooby-Doo as well, which was nice because Scooby-Doo's good memories of the cartoon series. So it was cool to be able to write for Scooby-Doo as well. So ended up doing some Scooby-Doo and some Legion for them. And actually had a whole slew of other Legion. Like I ended up doing, I think, 3 stories. 3 stories over the 20-issue run. I included in the last issue, actually, what ended up being the last issue, because the animated series got canceled short. I mean, there was only 2 seasons, right? Typically, back at that time, those animated series went like at least 4 or 5 seasons. So that was the expectation, but they cut it short after 2. So shortly thereafter, they decided to cancel the series because the cartoon wasn't continuing. Mm-hmm. Which is too bad because I had a few other stories in the pipeline that were.
So the comic followed the cartoon, right? It was in the continuity of that world.
Yeah. But we were able to, use any Legion character. It didn't necessarily have to be following exactly only the characters that were in the actually, because there were only 2 seasons. There wasn't a whole lot of episodes. Like really, like what was it? 26 episodes maybe. Mm-hmm. I think there was. I think it was 13 and 13. I don't think it was more than that, if I remember correctly. It's been a while now, but so yeah, we were given pretty much carte blanche to be able to pull in other characters, even if they.
Interesting. Is there like do you get the scripts for the show in advance to know what they're doing with it, so that you can know you just have your own stories and you have to?
I think the only thing we got was some sort of I don't even. I guess it was a Bible, a Bible of the treatment that they gave, that they had put together to sell the show, which was pretty extensive in terms of background and stuff. And plus, it came with a kit with all sorts of neat little things that was kind of neat. So like there's a whole marketing package around the kit too, so it's kind of neat. So yeah, we were able to see that, but I never saw the actual scripts of the episodes and stuff. So no, there wasn't any edict to actually follow or not follow what was going on with.
I guess it's not like, with a kid show, things generally stay kind of stationary. It's not like you're writing Sons of Anarchy or something where they're going to kill someone off next week and you can't do something about him because he's dying.
Yeah, and have to worry about, okay, where am I going to place this? Is this in between? Is this a season 1 episode, or is this in between season 1 and season 2? Yeah.
No, didn't have to worry.
Didn't have to worry about any of that. So we were just able to play in the world.
Yeah, I spoke with someone who wrote like an X-Men comic for a while, and I was like, that must have, or not X-Men, sorry, X-Files. And I was like, that must have been like, because generally the show had a kind of a standard template, but they were often shifting characters and people shifting in and out and doing different things. So it's got to be a bit of a headache when you're trying to use characters.
Exactly. Can I use this character, not character? Where's this character? Yeah.
And like I spoke with Ed Brisson one time, and he's talking about, the Marvel thing, that if you want to use a certain character, you have to run it up the flagpole and find out if you can, because they could be in some big event or they could be killed off, or like he wanted to use Constrictor, and then he found out that he was killed in like another comic like 2 weeks before or something. So you had to you had to like make him a stun or something, and he did another way to make a new version of Constrictor to make it work within the story, but it was like, stuff like that has got to be a bit of a stumbling block when it comes to the writing process.
It must be so much harder now, because there's so many more books out and so much more history, movies, so many more different things going on, that like having to keep up and saying, okay, what's going on with these characters right now?
And like even just Marvel, for an example, I mean, DC less or so, but with the extent of everything they're putting out with the shows and the new cartoons and the movies, and even the minor characters that are showing up in the movies, it's like, they're to use one and just be like, I just like this character. It's like there's a whole bunch of baggage that comes with that, because if he's in a movie, he's definitely gonna be showing up in the comics, so it's like every time they announce that these characters are going to be in movies, they all of a sudden the comics come out again with all the minute, the Moon Knight series is coming soon, so now Moon Knight's getting a new comic again, and they're going to put it on the site.
Jen McKay is doing that series.
Yeah.
Totally.
Jed's super cool. He lives out here.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had him on the show before.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like totally. Having superhero TV shows and films now, it puts the spotlight on a whole bunch of characters that might not necessarily, if they had their own way, not necessarily have any play. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Even just watching
I can see why they take advantage. You go, okay, well, this guy's getting a series, so we need to have a series out there.
Well, yeah, and even like the way it elevates
Oh.
certain characters that have never, like Star-Lord, for instance, like as far as Marvel goes in the history of Marvel Comics, he was never that big of a character. I can't say anybody ever said my favorite superhero is Star-Lord.
Nope.
And then they put it like even grew to rock. Like if you would have told me Rocket Raccoon would be in a movie even 20 years ago, I would have. They even told me Thanos
right?
would have been in a movie 20 years ago. I'd be like, you're crazy.
At least Thanos had the possibility. You knew that he had the possibility of it. But yeah, these other, well, I mean,
but you'd have to build a world to make it make sense. Like you couldn't have him show up in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movie, but you'd have to have a space stuff set up to establish what he is and where he came from. So, and even with like the Eternals and everything they're doing with that, like those are some pretty obscure characters. Just from an offshoot of Kirby, right? And to see them all get life and to see, I don't want to. I mean, the movie's still fairly new, so I don't want to spoil anything. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. No.
So there's some stuff in the Stinger that sets up some space characters that are kind of cool to see in live action. That like other characters similar to Rocket and those sort of people that you're like, I can't believe I'm seeing a live screen version of this. Like a big screen voiced by cool actors or played by cool actors. It's like it's really neat.
And suddenly those characters will become bigger than life right now because of that, right? It's like, because I mean that's what happened with Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Because Guardians of the Galaxy was a series that went a whole bunch of issues, sure, in 80s, 90s, or whatever it was.
The future Guardians from the year 3000 and something with
exactly. And all these were this was their Legion. They were trying to do a Legion of superheroes, right? And but yeah, then the movie comes out and doing a modern day version and just took off.
But even because that comic only came out in like the early 2000s, the version with the cast that we have now in the movies. Even in the second one, when they introduced the older Guardians that they were the Ravagers, Stakar and Firebrand and all those people, you're like this is so like Martin X and all these like super obscure characters, and you see like the Collector and all these cosmic characters and the Grandmaster. It's cool, man. Like as a fan, it just makes your head explode.
Yeah, totally. Because I mean, Collector is like I remember Collector back from the Avenger days. It's like, wow, the Collector's actually on in a film, like
played by Benicio del Toro. Like it's cool. It's like super cool. When I first saw the Avengers and they did the stinger where they showed you Thanos, like I was in the theater and I think I audibly gasped incredibly loudly. Like I probably drew attention because he was always my favorite villain, and like to know they're headed towards an altercation with him, and especially the way they eventually did it, like after 4 movies and all these tie-in things to lead towards this huge epic event, like it was crazy. And as a fan, someone who loved that character for my whole life, basically, I always found him very interesting as far as motivations go. Way better than most villains. Love. I mean, his motivation's love for death, but it's still love, which is very It's something quite different than just wanting to rule the world or the galaxy. I mean, they changed it in the movie, but that motivation to wipe out half the universe just to appease, to prove that someone you love, that you're worthy of their love, is a way different motivation than almost any villain you see in almost anything. It's not just money.
It is pretty unique, and
Starlin's always been a favorite because
I mean the earliest days, I mean the Thanos stories were classics. I mean Starlin's Avengers annuals and Marvel 2-in-1, like when he first appeared and all that. I mean those were amazing stories. So yeah, I mean it's so funny that it took so long, right, for all the various properties in Marvel and DC to be mined. And
well, I think technology
it's creating a really interesting dynamic now, though. I just find it so weird as an old-time comics reader that I can talk to people now about superheroes quite easily, but they're at a totally different context than me, because I've got 50 years worth of comics history that I can draw on all the various characters. And these guys have all, how many films? I don't know, 16 films. Whatever,
22 or 23 right now. I think 24, 25, somewhere around there.
That they're religious about. And I'm going, hey, that's great. I'm not as religious about it. I enjoy the films too, but
Yeah.
like how it's just weird for me. It's just weird for me because me growing up, if I wanted my superhero fix, it was comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today, the superhero fix is well,
everything.
gaming, animation, TV, film.
Yeah.
You don't need to read comics anymore, which is kind of sad. But also
Still,
nice.
I mean, hopefully the roads lead back to it. But no, and that's an interesting conversation because I've had that even with my own generation because I'm 36. So like even when I was a kid, it wasn't like cool to read comics as a teenager. Like I wasn't, one of the cool kids. I read them at home. I didn't carry them around school with me. And people knew I read them or whatever. I didn't hide it, but I wasn't like waving a flag like you would if you wore like a big Spider-Man t-shirt or something. Now, I mean, every kid has some kind of a superhero shirt on and like you can have conversations with people about Kang the Conqueror or other people that are showing up in these things that you're like, so obscure that you could before. And I remember reading an article or some comment somebody made when like back in the 80s, early 90s, 70s, if you saw a guy wearing a Superman shirt, you're like, there's a nerd. You're like, there's another guy, he's into comics, I'm going to talk to that guy. Now, if you see a kid wearing a Superman shirt, it's probably just a Superman shirt he's wearing. And like you need to seek out the more obscure shirts or the more like the shirt that has a bar from a comic, you know what I mean? That or that you might recognize. And you're like, that guy knows what's up. He's definitely a fan. Or like a Watchmen shirt, something like a commercial for the perfume or something. It's something that you're like, okay, that guy is definitely deeper into it. He's
into comics now. This guy's a film guy.
Which it could be.
Totally. Yeah, it totally does change a whole lot of things. Like I find it weird to being able to so openly talk about stuff, but you're right. It's totally different. People have totally different context now from it because of, it's been 20 plus years of of this change where it's everywhere in film, it's everywhere in TV, it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And
but you're right about how long it took because you'd think like looking for IPs for film and TV, they want something that's ready made, that's already got a built-in fandom. That's why Netflix does all these series that are based on popular graphic novels or books or anything that they already have fans in because
old TV shows.
Or rebooting old TV shows, which is huge right now. Let's put another Magnum PI or whatever the people are going to watch. So the fact that, with comics, you have like, you want to do a movie on or a film series or even a TV series on, I don't know, Sleepwalker, like some obscure Marvel character. You're like, all right, well, you have 50 years of comics and probably 200 scattered issues from all the different series about this one character. You like all the villains, the heroes, the side characters, the motivations, everything's there. You just have to put it into it. They take all of that and put it into a show and there you go.
Yeah, totally. And, or some of the obscure ones that don't even have that much could even have less, and then you can do a whole lot more. With them, right?
Then they can just expand it yourself and make it cool. Well, even like what I find interesting is a lot of the series that are the films and the shows are adapting are newer stories. Like that version of Guardians is only from 25 years ago. Like this Hawkeye series that's coming out in a few days is like based on a series that came out less than 10 years ago. Like I remember reading is it based off of the Fraction? It is. That's 100%. Like Pizza Dog's in it, and it's with Kate, and I'm pretty sure the clown character is in it too. So like villains like that are showing up are like, I
mean, for Hawkeye, really, that is if you look at the Hawkeye series over the years, that's the one to pull, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Is that or West Coast Avengers? So like,
it's like some of the some of the characters that they choose, you've got a bounty of storylines to choose from, right? Which is why I guess Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, all these characters were the ones that were being used so often. But now you have some of the more obscure ones, are obscure because I don't consider Hawkeye obscure, but it's like, but the series is that they have, there's less to go on, but there's one that's an obvious,
with the built-in,
they can have a lot of fun with that one, and really one of the more memorable ones because Hawkeye alone stories, they haven't done a ton of memorable things other than that one. So it's an
interesting tightrope they walk. I mean, they announced they're doing a Werewolf by Night special next year on Halloween. Or no, Werewolf by Night. Werewolf, yeah, that's right. Werewolf by Night. Okay, and cool. Gabriel Bal Garcia is playing the werewolf by night. So like,
You
the
know
guy,
what? I can totally see. I can
yeah, me
totally
too.
see that doing well, right?
Yeah, me
Like,
too.
because there haven't been a ton of werewolf TV shows, so yeah, why?
I
Why
think it's
wouldn't
just
that
like
do
a
well?
Halloween special. I don't know if it's a movie or like an hour-long special or what, but still, like
If
the
it does
fact that,
well,
yeah.
there'll be more, right?
And I mean, they've already cast, the next Blade, so they're kind of leaning into their horror division of the
Or
stuff, which is fun. Moon Knight, I think, is kind of being a part of that as well.
I'm kind of looking forward to Moon Knight because there is a lot of good stuff they can mine from comic stories from Moon Knight as well. So it'll be
100%.
interesting to see what they do there because there's been a lot of solid stories over the years that they can have fun with and
Yeah, and Oscar
a
Isaac's
lot
a
of
great
potential
actor.
with that character. I've always thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess back to you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
married? Yeah, you've been married for since you 97? You said somewhere in the
97. Yeah. Yeah. Still.
right
And
now.
still.
And kids?
Yeah. With one son. We have
Oh, one
Lucas.
son. Excellent. How old's your son?
He's 20.
Do you have any interest in comics?
Well, not terribly. He's special needs, so he's nonverbal. So
Oh, I
he's
see. I didn't know
not big into like he knows his dad is into that I love superheroes and comics and stuff. He's surrounded by it. He's more into like YouTube puzzles, all that, all that stuff. He loves trains, Santa parades, all those kind of things. But haven't not a big comics.
So was that part of the impetus behind the Riverdale character you worked on for Archie, Scarlet?
Yeah, that one. So I mean, when I heard that that character that they were doing stories for that character, I mean, I reached out to Nancy and I said, hey, I have a son with special needs. If you're looking for stories, I'd love to play in the Archie sandbox. So yeah, that's where that came from. I actually wrote a couple of stories for him, but only one so far is out, and that's the one that is available online. But yeah, that was definitely something because I think every writer tries to pull from their experiences and stuff. So it was nice to be able to write about an autistic character. My son, while isn't, it's Angelman syndrome, so it's within. I mean, it's its own syndrome, but there are similarities to ASD. So it was something that was. Based on my experiences, it was easy to write, to be able to write stories about. So,
well, I think
so. I was glad I was able to do that. Yeah.
Not just easy for you in the way of mining material, but also I think it's important that people that write about this sort of stuff are people that have experienced it in a way, so that perhaps if it's reaching out to other people that perhaps are autistic themselves or have someone in their family, perhaps it can the experiences and the things that you speak to are more personal and or maybe something they can relate to or perhaps use in dealing with their own family members or their own.
And honestly, it creates a better story. Like I find my best stories are the ones that have pieces of me in it, whether you can see it or not, right? Yeah. You know what I mean, right? Like some are more overt. If I'm writing a story that's based off of directly based off of my experiences, which I've done stories like that, or ones where the theme may be based on something from experiences that I've had, because that's the only way. Like everybody thinks, I don't know if everybody thinks it's easy to be a writer, but
I hope not.
I
hope people don't think that,
because everybody has ideas, right? So a lot of people think, oh well, it's an idea, and you think of a plot, and you're done. And there's so many more nuances to it, right? Yeah, there's the idea. You got to figure out the plot, but theme plays an important part too. Having the right theme going against that plot and idea, and characterization too, because it could be a totally plot heavy story, but if the characters don't sing, if the characters are just espousing, advancing the plot and being expositional, sure, you might have if the idea and plot is good enough, it's, people may enjoy it, but it could be so much better. It could be so much better if there was a little more work done to give some nuances to the characters and the theme and all that stuff. So,
as a writer, you must be pitched a lot. People even as someone, because I've written a few just indie comics I published myself and
Cool.
And draw and stuff. So I've had people be like, "Oh, I have this idea," and it's like, okay, well, it sounds like a nice idea, but you got to write it out into something. If you just, you don't walk into a Netflix meeting and say, here's my idea, that's it. Like it needs to be fleshed out. It needs to be going somewhere or have a definitive end.
Totally.
Just a concept is not going to get you in the door.
Totally. I love the folks who are so guarded about their idea.
Oh yeah.
I have this idea that's never been done before, and I give the look. Yeah, right, okay, sure.
In all of fiction, no one's ever thought of something similar.
Sure.
Yeah.
No one's ever done this before. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Like it's like their $1 million ticket. It's their $1 million lottery ticket they got in their back pocket. They're going to cash in someday.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, that's great, but you need to.
You still got to execute it. You still got to execute it. It's all about the execution.
Yeah, you still have to put in the work to go.
You can give 10 writers. You can give 10 writers a concept, an idea, and it will be 10 different things.
No, right? 100%.
Right. So it's the beauty of creation and writing and building, a world and all that stuff. So.
Well, I had a conversation with someone similarly about that because there's a script version. I do some acting, and I'm in a theater group in my town here, and we had a play reading last night for Frankenstein. It's a script version of it's the most accurate script I've ever read that's based on the book, as far as it's very, very similar to the book. They performed it in London years ago with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller playing the Doctor and the Monster, and they would swap roles. So I'm interested in perhaps doing it in my theater group maybe next year for Halloween. So we're reading it last night, and we're just kind of discussing about the Frankenstein idea, because most people are familiar with the Boris Karloff one from the Universal movies, the black and white, he doesn't talk, and if you read the original novel, he reads, he's very intelligent, he philosophizes about what life is, what creation is, and you learn about his humanity through what he learns. And the tragedy is that by learning to be human, he learns to be to hurt and to be sad and to be angry and all those things that come with being a human. And it's got some really deep human themes, but you look at like that book and that concept, and then you look at that Universal movie, which is very different, and you look at like Young Frankenstein, or you look at all the different things over the years, even DC's version of Frankenstein, Marvel's, and what they've done with it. It's like that core idea is branched into so many various different things that it's a good example of that. You can make 1,000 different Frankenstein stories that all go different ways. Totally. With different themes.
Yeah. It all depends. It all, obviously it all starts at that point, but then like you said, it branches out, and it could be anything. I even find that the same thing, if you give a couple of writers even tighter details of the same thing, there's still a voice, right? There's still a voice. I have a voice, you have a voice, creating, everybody does, right? That will make the same story slightly different. So like the Frankenstein example, where you can do a comedy version, you can do a soap opera drama version of it. You can do whatever. You can do a sci-fi version of Frankenstein. There are those types of things where the concepts can spring, but there's also bringing the voice of the writer that comes in, right, and makes it its own, like the characterizations behind all the characters and all that stuff, that the way I do it would make it different than the way you would write those same characters, right? So voice is a big part too, right? So
So before we get into wrapping things up and letting you get on with your day, so Dominion Jack, that's the character that you created with Chapter House, right? And that's in the anthology series.
Yeah.
And is that like an old character that was redone, or is this the straight up creation that you've created?
Straight up creation, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted I wanted to create a kind of legacy, classic, pulpy kind of hero. I had the power set in mind. I know the name of the character came through a whole bunch of different iterations until I settled on Dominion Jack. That made sense, and it just made sense as a name.
That's a nice throwback.
I was not trying to be vain and picking my name as the name of the character.
Well, it's very like, if you look at pulp heroes, they always have some kind of cool a pronoun and then a fairly basic name.
Basic name to follow it. Yeah, and it just felt right. And actually, I don't even think at the time that I had realized that. Subconsciously I must have, but Canada Jack, the 1940s character, a 1940s character called Canada Jack. So it's kind of neat that afterwards, after I was way down, it dawned on me, like, oh my God, I guess there is a bit of a legacy connection. That there's this 1940s Canadian superhero, a bunch of appearances, not as memorable as Johnny Canuck or some of the others, but there it was. But yeah, I just, so there's that connection, and that I'd like to have, eventually one day have fun with that, because that would be kind of neat to have,
for sure,
to show some sort of connection there. But Dominion Jack, yeah, it was my way to kind of, I wanted to tell a story about legacy, about, the story first started with Jack and his daughter, bringing up his daughter as a superhero. So playing off the whole a different dynamic for the Batman and Robin kind of idea, but with family. So it and just wanted to. At the time, this was something that all of us for the it came up True Patriot. Before that, we had some we did a couple of crowdfunding campaigns to do a couple of anthology books where and Jack was part of it. And we just wanted to tell more Canadian superhero stories at the time. There wasn't enough out there, and so I wanted to create an Ottawa-based superhero, and just put my stamp on. I didn't feel Ottawa had ever been really noted. Any superhero stories, Canadian superhero stories I've ever read, from Alpha Flight to anything else,
which is interesting because it's the capital.
Yeah, exactly. Right. so I wanted to use locations that I know very well in being from here, and use that as the backdrop of this kind of story about family legacy.
Yeah, I find the character interesting, especially knowing a bit about your story, like your history yourself. Just that he's a character that draws from all of the people of Canada, basically, or who's around him, essentially. As someone as a child of immigrants, it's like the diversity and how many different people across Canada that we have. It's a very diverse nation. Plays into his powers and strengthens him, and I find that a very interesting and different take on the power structure of a superhero. But also like where it comes from, because I've never seen. I mean, there are things similar-ish maybe in the past if I dig deep, but really making the Canada's diversity a big part of his powers is very interesting. And I think it resonates well, knowing that your history as well.
Yeah, no, definitely that plays part. I found a lot of story ideas that could be pulled from that power set as well. And I mean, I never thought it was done to any big extent. Like I think Uncle Sam, maybe you can say the Uncle Sam character might be sort of like a Canadian version of that, but Uncle Sam never really played it that.
No, it never really went into it in a real way. I mean, it's cool,
way, right?
Yeah, because with your character, it gives you a great medium to explore that. You know what I mean? You can explore what he gets from this group of people or from this area or from that. It's really cool. It's a great idea.
Yeah. And and just I think the only other thing I thought of when I was creating it was I was a big fan of the Animal Man series, Grant Morrison's run.
One of my favorites all time.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan.
Oh man, that first arc just blew my mind. Like first 5 issues, I was just like, oh, can this get any better? I love the whole run. It was just that's a masterclass actually. If you want to look at structure in terms of how to write comics,
and also to go even to write something different. Like he was one of the first to really break the fourth wall, and with Deadpool and stuff, it's done all the time now. But to do it the way he did it back in the day was so interesting and different, and and even just the core of animal, like I'm a big animal person, the core of animal rights and making that what your champion is fighting for was quite different too. It's not just stopping a bad guy from destroying the world. It's actually trying to make a difference with how the world treats animals, which is very interesting in itself.
No, so those were kind of like the couple of characters I think now looking back and going, there's the closest things to it. But I had a lot of fun with the Dominion Jack series, and I mean, the last little while, the 2010s, anyways, a lot of my time writing the serialized stories of Dominion Jack, and only available digitally right now. But I'm looking to get that the book one collection in print form, and also working on a new story actually with Hugh Rookwood, and actually with Mark Chamberlain actually too.
I love Mark is great.
So we're working on a new Dominion Jack story along with Northgard. So, having a lot of fun with that too. So
cool. His Northgard books were very interesting. When you were talking about some of the stuff that was sort of reminiscent of other earlier books, I was thinking of when me and him talked about the comparisons to Captain Canuck with Northgard.
And for me, I know I've told Mark this when we've chatted too, is like, for me, like, I remember Northgard from the 80s along the same lines as it was defining for me, as much as there were a lot of, we mentioned Crisis, Watchmen, Dark Knight, all those books from the mid 80s. Northgard came out around the same time too, and
just before it actually.
And as a Canadian series, I thought, hey, this is really good. So I remember it quite fondly. I remember Northgard more fondly than Captain Canuck.
Well, Canuck was kind of fell into those old, like almost the really, really old comics, like with the old Captain America comics, were just punching Nazis, and it's not it's that exciting. Captain Canuck really fell into that sort of camp, but Northgard actually was like, kind of political, like deeply political in a way, referencing the Quebec Black Quebecois, the separation from Canada, secret, like even kind of prescient in that, like, people within the government that are like racist and like, trying to run this, like, it was in pre-Watchmen, like this, a lot of that sort of stuff. It really felt kind of like a father to that series, which I thought was really
totally. And so so it's fun working with him on a new
awesome
story, team up story.
I look forward to reading it, and let me know if you guys get the collection out for Dominion Jack, or if you're doing a Kickstarter, and I'll make sure to share it and get it out.
We'll do
because I'm totally down for that.
Awesome.
Anything else about coming up, or anything you want to talk about?
So lots happening with me, though, especially the last couple of years in the pandemic. I've actually been able to catch up on, in terms of doing since during lockdowns and stuff, there was lots of free time to be able to complete projects and stuff. There are a number of things that are coming out, like Dominion Jack, like this for the last little while anyways, a lot of stuff was digitally, so now I've got some new things that are starting to come out. So I mean, last year I did a second volume of Flip, and a kind of a Elseworlds kind of anthology, where I curated and edited. I contributed a few stories, but also brought in some other writers and artists in to do some stories. So
that's like a real world what if thing, right? That's what.
Real world what if Flip. So a lot, they range from horror stories to like slice of life stories to those kind of things. So I've always loved the what if formula. So
me too.
Kind of did a couple of volumes of that. So volume 2 of that came out. I've also done a few short stories. One that at Cloudscape Comics, they're out west, they're out in Vancouver. I did a story about dementia for their this mental health anthology they did, Through the Labyrinths of the Mind. So I've got a short story coming out there with also an East Coast artist, Devin Taylor. I don't know if you know Devin Taylor.
I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah. So we did a story there. So that's coming in. So that book's done. Actually, I'm waiting for it to be copies to be shipped to me soon. So
excellent.
So it's ready to go. I'm also doing a story for the next Raid anthology. That's going to be a Kickstarter early next year. So working on the last story is done. So once the Kickstarter, we're just waiting for the after the holidays to do the Kickstarter for that. And then most of my stuff following that is stuff that has been done for a while, but is finally coming out in 2022 and 2023. There is a series I'm doing for Lev Gleason that I can't announce yet, but hopefully in the next month or two, we'll be able to announce that a series that I'm working on for them. That I think will be interesting to some Legion fans. So,
excellent.
If you're a fan of the Legion, I think you'd like this book. And then I'm doing a sci-fi graphic novel for Marcosia. That's due out next year as well. But one of my big things in 2023 that I wrote a while ago, but it's just book publishing. This is because it takes so long. And the pandemic actually pushed it out. Is I'm doing a book for Kids Can Press, a middle grade book called Thunderboom. And it's a superhero adventure series, graphic novel, I should say, not a series, that's coming out in early 2023. And I can't wait for the promotions and stuff to come out for that, because I'm really proud of that story. And Claudia de Villa is doing a really great job on the art I've seen so far. She's working on it. It looks awesome. So I can't wait for that story to come out and be able to promote that. So that is that, I'm hoping that leads to more, because I'd love to tell more stories from that book, but that's one of my big things to come. Also, one of the other things is I've earlier this year I now represented by an agent, and so I'm working with him in terms of trying to get a couple of ideas that properties of middle grade and YA properties sold to book publishers. So I'm hoping to share some good news on a couple of things that I've been working on this year as pitch packages that will hopefully find a home that I can share some good news about. So
that's fantastic. Well, it sounds like a lot of big stuff coming down the pipeline. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, keeping very busy. So the next couple of years, I think there'll be a nice steady stream of stuff finally coming out in print that I have been working on the last few years. So it'll be nice to finally have them come out and hear what people think. And actually, with the pandemic slowly getting out of that pandemic, it'll be nice to start going to shows and cons again, and just seeing people, hopefully coming out east again too. Because
let me know if you do. I'd love to love to meet in person again. Definitely meet in Halifax and have a drink or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, a lot of these people that I meet when I have these conversations, I was like, man, it'd be cool to meet this person in real life. I'm gonna have to try to make that happen someday. Or if I ever find my way out in Ottawa, I'll let you know.
Yeah, it's so we've gotten so used to seeing people on screens now.
I know. I'm glad that the life has gotten back to some semblance of normality, and that in-person hangouts aren't really something you have to think about too much anymore. You can just go do it, because I was having the Zoom party exhaustion after the first few months, where one group of friends have a Zoom party on a Friday, the next Saturday, some would be Sunday. Your mom would want to talk to you on Friday. It's like, man, I just don't want to look at a screen anymore.
I know.
Yeah, I watch a lot of movies, and I play video games occasionally and stuff like that. So it's I can do that, but just I don't know, engaging on a level like this every day constantly just got to be too much for me for a while. It's I can't have a party night.
Yeah, exactly. My son's obsessed with FaceTime and Messenger video and all this stuff. So we're always talking to family, even ourselves. We get to the point where we're, one of us is in another room and the other, and we're FaceTime each other because he just loves the interaction that way. But it's all this. It'll be nice. It'll be nice to socialize in person.
Yeah, it's I think I'd rather just drink alone tonight, please. so I don't got to look at somebody else. Just leave me alone. Yeah. Oh, well, thanks so much, Jack. It was great talking with you.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. This was awesome. Glad for the opportunity to be able to speak.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll run into each other again soon.
Yes, that'd be great.
Have a great one.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye. Great conversation with Jack Briglio. I can't thank him enough for being on the show and for you for listening. Next week, or next 2 weeks rather, we have a new episode coming out. I don't normally advertise who the next guest is going to be, but thankfully I can this time. That guest will be Jay Torres, another Canadian comic book creator. And another thanks to Tony for making that introduction, because he does some work with Chapter House as well, as long as another other really cool books internationally and right here in Canada. So I'll be talking with Jay Torres in 2 weeks' time. Christmas is nearing, folks, so make sure to give the gift of the Graphic Histories podcast. If you have a friend or loved one that's into nerdy things and may find interest in learning more about the insights from the creators that are out there creating it, then let them know. Share, tell a loved one, a friend about my show. It would be greatly appreciated, and it would be the best gift I could ask for this holiday season. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time.